The frontier was a harsh mistress, but none felt her cruelty like Naya, a young Apache woman left alone after the cavalry's raid. Samuel Ward found her half dead, bringing her to his isolated ranch, where most settlers would have left her to fate. Locals whispered he saved her to quiet his ghosts, the Apache women and children he couldn't protect during the war. Samuel kept his distance, all hard edges and brooding silence, while Naya brought life back to the forgotten homestead. Each sunrise brought them closer, each sunset more dangerous. Their unspoken connection grew in the spaces between words, in chores shared and meals taken in silence. One evening near the corral, her hand brushed his, the touch electric and forbidden. "Please," she whispered, and slowed down. Did she mean his heart or hers? Would the ghosts of his past allow him to find redemption in her eyes? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The distant sound of hoofbeats still woke Samuel Ward before dawn. 17 years since he'd ridden with the cavalry, yet his body remembered. He sat up in his sparse bedroom, sweat-soaked despite the morning chill. Outside, the New Mexico territory slept under a blanket of stars, unaware of the ghosts haunting its newest settler. Samuel's eyes drifted to the worn leather sheath propped in the corner. The bone handle of his hunting knife gleamed in the half-light, a gift from his father when he enlisted. "A man needs something reliable," his father had said. That knife had seen more blood than most doctors. He rose, bones protesting the movement. At 43, his body carried the memory of too many hard rides and cold camps. The floorboards creaked beneath his bare feet as he moved to splash water on his face from the basin. In the small mirror above it, a stranger looked back, grey, threading his once dark hair, lines carved deep around eyes that had seen too much. From the adjoining room came the soft sounds of Naya's breathing. 3 weeks since he'd found her half dead near Bitter Creek, and still she slept like someone expecting to run. Samuel moved quietly, not wanting to wake her. The coffee pot was on before the sun broke the horizon. Samuel stood on his porch, watching the first golden light touch the distant mountains. This land was supposed to bring peace. 3 years he'd been here, building something from nothing, and still the dreams came. Captain Ward. The voice from his past made him flinch. Not real, just memory. Colonel Briggs standing over the bodies at White Rock Canyon, blood still fresh on the rocks. "Fine work, Captain Ward. These savages won't trouble the settlers anymore. 37 dead. Women, children, the men away hunting. Not a fair fight, not a fight at all. A slaughter." Samuel's hands trembled as he raised the coffee cup. That night he'd ridden away from camp, desertion papers be damned, left his commission, his future, everything he'd worked for. Taken only his father's knife and the weight of what he'd done. The town of Mercy Falls tolerated him because he kept to himself. Bought supplies, sold cattle, never caused trouble. The whispers followed him nonetheless. Deserter, traitor, man with no honor, if they only knew. The sun was fully up when he heard Naya moving inside, her footsteps hesitant, still learning the boundaries of her new prison. Or sanctuary. Samuel wasn't sure which he'd offered. "There's coffee," he said when the door creaked open. Didn't turn to look at her. Couldn't bear the wariness in her eyes, the same look the survivors at White Rock had worn. "Thank you." Her English was good, better than he expected. Mission-taught, perhaps. They stood in silence, the vast landscape spread before them. His ranch was modest. 1-story house, barn, corral, and endless acres of scrubby grazing land stretching toward the mountains. "Not much to show for a life." "You have bad dreams," she said finally. Samuel's grip tightened on his cup. "We all got something that follows us. You speak my language in your sleep." Words of apology. The coffee turned bitter in his mouth. He'd never told anyone about White Rock. Now this woman, this stranger he'd brought home like a stray, heard his confessions every night. "I should check the north pasture fence," he said, setting down his cup. "Retreat, always retreat. The woman in your dreams," Naya said, stopping him. "The one you could not save." She was called Kianla. Samuel froze, the name hitting him like a physical blow. The young mother who'd begged for her children's lives. The first to fall. How do you know that name? His voice was barely a whisper. I was there, Naya said simply, hidden in the rocks. I saw everything. Samuel turned slowly, truly looking at her for the first time that morning. In the golden light, her face was a map of loss and survival, not so different from his own. Then you know what I am, he said. I know what you did, she corrected. I know you left that same day, and now I know why you found me. Why you bring me here? Her eyes held no hatred, only a weariness that matched his own. Samuel unsheathed his father's knife, its blade catching the morning sun. The same blade that had cut free a frightened horse during the massacre, his one small act of decency in a day of horrors. You want this? He asked, offering it handle first. Justice comes for all men eventually. Naya looked at the knife, then back to Samuel's face. Justice is not mine to give. She turned and walked back into the house, leaving Samuel alone with the knife, the sunrise, and the weight of a past that had finally caught up to him. Dawn light filtered through the small window as Naya sat cross-legged on the floor of her room. The space was spare, a narrow bed, a wooden chair, a chest for the few belongings Samuel had given her. 3 weeks in this strange house, and still it felt like someone else's skin. In her hands, she cradled a small clay bowl, chipped at the rim and stained from years of use. It was the only possession she'd managed to save. Her mother's mixing bowl for healing salves and medicines. Naya ran her fingers along the faded symbols, etched into its side. Protection, strength, wisdom. The familiar texture grounded her when memories threatened to pull her under. You mix what your mother taught you, her grandmother had once said. But the true medicine comes from here. She had pressed a weathered finger against Naya's heart. Listen to the plants. They speak to those who honor them. Naya closed her eyes, remembering the day fire came to her village. Not the first attack they had weathered, but the last. She had been gathering juniper berries, her mother's bowl tucked in her gathering pouch. The distant thunder of horses had sent her scrambling for the high rocks. Her mother's final instruction burned into her mind. If soldiers come, hide in the high places. Return only when the eagles circle again. The soldiers had been efficient, swift, merciless. From her hiding place, Naya had watched Captain Ward, younger then, his face not yet carved by regret, following orders with mechanical precision, until the moment hesitation flickered across his features, until he turned his horse and rode away while gunshots still echoed through the canyon. She hadn't recognized him at first, when he found her near Bitter Creek. 3 weeks ago. 4. The days had blurred after her escape from the mission school. 5 years of prayers and scrubbed floors and forbidden language. 5 years of becoming someone else until the walls closed in, and she ran. Hunger and fever had nearly taken her when a man on horseback appeared like a mirage in the heat. Only when she woke in this strange house, the man standing awkward and watchful in the doorway, did something stir in her memory. The bowl warmed beneath her touch as she began to mix dried sage and juniper. The familiar scent transported her to before, to her mother's hands guiding hers, to laughter around evening fires, to belonging. A knock at the door pulled her from memory. "There's breakfast," Samuel said through the wood, always careful not to enter, to maintain what distance he could in the small house. "I will come," she answered, setting the bowl aside. Their strange dance of coexistence continued. She the unwanted guest, he the reluctant host, both pretending the past wasn't a third presence in every room. In the kitchen, Samuel stood at the stove, his back to her. A plate of eggs and bacon waited on the table. More food than she would have received at the mission. Offered without the expected prayer or gratitude. "You didn't need to cook for me," she said. Taking her seat, "Need to eat anyway." His words clipped, eyes avoiding hers as he poured coffee. Since her revelation yesterday about White Rock, the weight between them had grown heavier. They ate in silence until Samuel cleared his throat. "Town's 5 miles east if you want to leave." "I won't stop you." Naya set down her fork. "Where would I go?" "Back to your people." The laugh that escaped her held no humor. "My people are scattered. The ones who survived." She studied his face, searching for the young officer from her memories. The cavalry sent the children to schools, the adults to reservations. There is nowhere to return to. Samuel flinched as if struck. The mission school. You ran from there? She nodded, one hand unconsciously touching the scar at her hairline. Punishment for speaking her language. They're probably looking for you, he said. Yes. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken implications. If found, she would be sent back. Or worse. Samuel pushed back from the table. I'm heading to the north pasture. Fences need mending. A pause. You can stay, long as you need. Not generosity, penance. Why did you leave? She asked suddenly. That day at White Rock. Why did you ride away? His eyes finally met hers, haunted and hollow. Because I couldn't wash the blood off my hands. After he left, Naya returned to her room and picked up her mother's bowl again. Carefully, she mixed the herbs that would help heal the wound on Samuel's arm she had noticed, but he never mentioned. Later she would leave it by his door, a small offering in their precarious balance of debt and redemption. The healing would start with small things. It always did. A month passed in cautious routine. Samuel rose before dawn, Naya an hour later. They orbited each other like wary planets, sharing space but rarely words. Breakfast eaten in silence. Chores divided without discussion. Dinner accompanied only by the clink of cutlery and the distant howl of coyotes. On the kitchen wall hung an old cavalry canteen, its dented surface catching the morning light as Samuel drank his coffee. The leather strap was cracked with age, the metal scratched from years of travel. Samuel's eyes often drifted to it while he ate, though he never touched it. Naya had noticed his gaze, wondered at the memories it held. Do you need water for the garden? Samuel asked, breaking 3 days of silence. Naya looked up from the beans she was sorting. Yes, the soil dries quickly. He nodded, returning to his coffee. Words between them were practical, necessary. Nothing more, yet changes came in small measures. Naya had swept the floors, arranged wildflowers in a jar by the window, hung herbs to dry from the ceiling beams. Samuel had built her a planting box for medicinal herbs, repaired the loose boards on the porch where she liked to sit at dusk. Neither acknowledged these gestures. In town, whispers followed Samuel when he bought supplies. Mrs. Holloway at the general store peered over her spectacles. That Indian girl still at your place, Mr. Ward? She works for room and board, he answered flatly. The shopkeeper's thin lips pressed together. Decent Christian women available in this county, you know. Proper housekeepers. Samuel placed coins on the counter. Just the supplies, Mrs. Holloway. Sheriff Mills caught him loading his wagon. Ward, heard you've got company out at your place. Samuel secured a flour sack. There's something on your mind, Sheriff. Folks talk. Apache girl living with a man alone raises questions. She cooks. Tends garden. Keeps to herself. Samuel met the lawman's gaze. Any law against hiring help? Mills shrugged. No law, just advice. Be careful. Some haven't forgotten the raids. Feelings run deep, Samuel knew. The rope tree outside town had seen its share of frontier justice. Not all victims had been guilty of anything beyond their bloodline. Back at the ranch, Naya was hanging laundry when he returned. The wind caught her long black hair, whipping it across her face. For a moment, framed against the vast blue sky, she looked like freedom itself. Samuel unloaded supplies, aware of her watching from the corner of her eye. They had developed a silent language, knowing when to move aside, when to pass tools, when to leave a room to give the other space. That night, rain drummed on the tin roof. Samuel sat mending a bridle by lamplight, while Naya sorted her dried herbs at the other end of the table. The domesticity of it struck him suddenly. This quiet evening routine they'd fallen into without discussion. Thunder cracked, and the lamp flickered. Naya's hands stilled. Storm reminds you of the guns, Samuel said, surprising himself. She looked up, eyes reflecting the lamplight. You remember too, not a question. A shared understanding. I hear them some nights, he admitted. The shots, the screams. I hear my mother calling my name. Her voice was soft, telling me to run. The canteen on the wall caught the lamplight, drawing both their eyes. Why do you keep it? She asked. The soldier's water carrier. Samuel's hands stilled on the leather bridle, to remember what thirst does to a man, what it makes him capable of, and what does it make him capable of? Following orders he knows are wrong. His jaw tightened. Watching children die because someone decided they weren't children. Just enemies. The truth hung between them, more intimate than any conversation they'd shared. Naya returned to her herbs. After a long silence, she said, "My grandmother taught that a person dies twice. Once when breath leaves the body. Again when no one speaks their names." Her fingers traced patterns in spilled herb dust. "I speak their names each night. My family, my village. So they live." Samuel looked at his rough hands. "I don't know their names." "Not most of them. I know them," she said. "All of them." Something shifted between them, the possibility that her memory and his regret might together form a kind of justice neither could achieve alone. The next morning, Samuel took down the canteen. Naya found it later, buried behind the barn, the earth mounded fresh above it. That evening, when Samuel returned from checking the herd, a simple stew waited on the stove. For the first time, Naya sat at the table before he served himself. For the first time, when he sat across from her, their eyes met without quickly darting away. Small steps on a long road towards something neither could yet name. The spring sun had barely crested the eastern hills when Samuel spotted it, a flash of chestnut in the distance, moving like liquid fire across the landscape. The wild stallion had been haunting his grazing lands for weeks, leading away 2 of his mares already. "Not today," he muttered, saddling his gelding. He found Naya at the garden, her hands dark with soil. 2 months on his ranch, and the once barren patch now burst with life, corn, beans, squash, and herbs he couldn't name. "Going after that stallion," he said, adjusting his hat. "Might be late." Naya shaded her eyes, studying him. "The red one?" "With the white blaze." Samuel nodded. "I will come." Not a request. A statement, he frowned. "It's dangerous work, for a man who thinks like a soldier." She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I will show you another way." 20 minutes later, they rode double on his gelding, her body a warm presence against his back. Samuel kept his spine rigid, uncomfortable with the proximity. They found the stallion drinking at a stream that cut through the eastern pasture. "Beautiful," Naya whispered. The stallion was magnificent, muscled shoulders tapering to powerful haunches, mane tangled with burrs and twigs from wild living. A rawhide rope dangled from his neck, evidence of a previous capture and escape. Samuel dismounted, helping Naya down with awkward hands. From his saddlebag he withdrew a coiled lasso. "Wait," she said, touching his arm. The contact, rare between them, made him freeze. "Watch first." From the pocket of her skirt, she produced a worn wooden flute, small enough to fit in her palm. The wood was smooth from years of handling, simple designs carved into its surface. "My father made this," she said, running her fingers over the instrument, "for calling deer during hunts. But horses listened too." Naya settled on a sun-warmed rock, cross-legged, her back straight. The flute's voice emerged soft and clear, not a tune exactly, more a pattern of notes that mimicked birds, wind, water. Samuel stood transfixed as the melody wrapped around him like smoke. The stallion's head lifted, ears pricked forward. Nostrils flared. "Don't move," she whispered between notes. For nearly an hour she played. The stallion circled, retreated, returned, each time coming closer. Samuel had never seen anything like it. The patience, the gentleness, so different from his approach of chase and conquer. Finally, the stallion stood 20 feet away, still wary but curious. Naya set down the flute and reached into her other pocket, producing a handful of dried apples. "Now we wait," she said. Samuel shifted, uncomfortable with inaction. "We could have had him roped by now, and then what?" Her eyes never left the horse. "You would have a body in your corral, but his spirit would still be running. Is that what you want?" The question hung between them. Samuel found himself thinking of the Apache villages he'd helped destroy. Bodies contained, spirits scattered. "My father said true horsemanship begins with respect," Naya continued. The horse chooses you as much as you choose him. By sunset, the stallion was eating from her hand. By dusk, Samuel was able to stroke its neck while Naya held its attention. The rawhide rope remained, but the stallion no longer flinched when touched. "We should head back," Samuel said as darkness fell. "Try again tomorrow," Naya nodded. "He will remember." Riding home under Star Splash, Samuel found himself relaxing, allowing his back to curve to match her presence behind him. The silence between them had changed quality, no longer tense but comfortable. "Your father," he said finally. "He taught you well." "Yes, he was the best horseman in our band. At White Rock, he couldn't finish. Yes, he died there." Samuel's throat tightened. "I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Yet her arms remained around his waist. Her cheek rested against his shoulder. Forgiveness wasn't being offered, but perhaps something equally valuable. Truth without hatred. Back at the ranch, lamps glowed in windows, the house a beacon in darkness. Samuel helped her down, their hands lingering longer than necessary. "Why did you help me today?" he asked. "With the stallion." "After everything," Naya looked at the flute in her hand. "My father believed in balance, that all living things seek harmony, even when thrown into chaos." She offered the flute to him. "Keep this tonight. Let its spirit remind you. I can't take it. It's your memory of him." "I have my memories here." She touched her heart. "The flute is just wood. Its power comes from how it's used." Samuel accepted the small instrument, its weight insignificant in his palm, yet suddenly the heaviest thing he'd ever held. An offering. A challenge. "Thank you," he said, the words inadequate for what had passed between them. That night, he sat on his porch, turning the flute in his hands, wondering if a man could learn a new way of being in the world. If capturing something's body while honoring its spirit might be a path toward redemption. In the corral, the wild stallion watched him through the rails, no longer panicked, not yet tame. Somewhere in between, like the strange peace growing between a soldier and a survivor. The sound of approaching horses pulled Samuel from the barn where he'd been mending tack. 3 riders approached from the east, dust clouds rising behind them. Something in their rigid postures sent a familiar warning through his body. Military men. Even in civilian clothes, they carried themselves with that unmistakable bearing. Samuel wiped his hands on a rag, eyes scanning the property for Naya. She was hanging laundry behind the house, her back to the approaching visitors. "Naya," he called, keeping his voice casual while closing the distance between them. "We have company. Best if you go inside." She followed his gaze, her body tensing. Without question, she gathered her basket and disappeared through the back door. Samuel's hand went instinctively to his hip, where once a service revolver had hung. Now empty. His shotgun was in the house, propped by the door. Too far. The riders pulled up in a semicircle before him, dust settling around their boots as they dismounted. Samuel recognized the man in the center immediately, Lieutenant James Mercer. They'd ridden together in the 6th Cavalry. The other 2 were younger, strangers with hard eyes and the weathered look of frontier soldiers. "Well, I'll be damned," Mercer said, removing his hat. A smile that didn't reach his eyes spread across his face. "If it isn't Captain Ward himself." "It's just Ward now," Samuel corrected, not offering his hand. "Been a long time, Mercer. 8 years, 4 months. Mercer looked around, assessing the modest ranch with undisguised judgment. "So this is where deserters end up. Can't say much for your ambitions." The younger men chuckled, hands resting casually near their sidearms. "What brings you to my property?" Samuel asked, ignoring the bait, passing through. "Heard rumors in town about the infamous Samuel Ward going native out here." Mercer's eyes drifted toward the house. "Said you'd taken up with an Apache woman." "Had to see for myself." Samuel shifted, blocking Mercer's view of the house. "You've had your look. Now move on." Mercer reached into his coat, producing a silver pocket watch. The timepiece gleamed in the sunlight, its engraved surface familiar. The regimental insignia of the 6th Cavalry. "Remember this?" Mercer dangled it from its chain. "Colonel's commendation for White Rock Canyon. Service above and beyond duty." His smile turned cruel. "Your name was on the list before you ran." Samuel's jaw tightened. The White Rock victory had been celebrated with commendations all around. 37 dead Apache for 0 cavalry casualties, a success by military standards. Didn't want it then. Don't want it now. No, you developed a conscience, didn't you? Right when it counted most. Mercer pocketed the watch, his expression hardening. You left good men hanging. We took the questions about missing supplies, covered for your absence. Meanwhile, you've been playing farmer with Indian scraps, one of the younger soldiers spat. Thought you had more pride than to bed down with savages, Captain. Samuel's fists clenched. You're on my land. I suggest you watch your mouth. Or what? The young soldier stepped forward, hand now resting openly on his revolver. Squaw got your balls in her medicine pouch? What happened next occurred so quickly the men barely had time to react. Samuel's hand shot out, gripping the soldier's wrist, twisting until the revolver clattered to the dirt. His other fist connected with the man's jaw, dropping him to his knees. The second soldier reached for his weapon, but froze when Samuel's boot came to rest on the fallen revolver. You've forgotten who you're talking to, Samuel said quietly, danger edging his voice. I taught half the tactics your unit still uses. Now pick up your friend and get off my property. Mercer's face had gone cold, calculating. The deserter still has fight in him. Interesting. He signaled the standing soldier to help his companion. We're heading to Fort Shelton. Going to be in the area a while, tracking down some hostiles reported north of here. This region's peaceful. No raiding parties for years, Mercer shrugged. Orders say different. Army's cleaning house ward, rounding up strays, settling old scores. His eyes flicked to the house where Naya now stood in the doorway watching. Dealing with collaborators, too. The threat hung in the air between them. That sounds like military business, Samuel said evenly. I'm a rancher now. For the moment, Mercer mounted his horse, looking down at Samuel. Army has a long memory, Captain. So do I. Might be time to consider your loyalties. As the riders departed, Samuel remained motionless, watching until they disappeared into the distance. Only then did he allow his shoulders to slump, the facade of confidence falling away. Naya approached, her steps silent on the packed earth. In her hands, she held something he hadn't seen in years, his old service compass. Brass case dented on one side from the time it had stopped a knife meant for his ribs. I found this, she said, when cleaning the storage trunk. Samuel took it, the weight familiar in his palm. The needle swung erratically, no longer able to find true north. They will come back, Naya said. It wasn't a question. Samuel nodded, his eyes still on the broken compass. Yes, because of me. No. He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. Because of me. Because some debts never get settled out here. That night, Samuel cleaned his shotgun by lamplight, the broken compass open beside him on the table. Naya sat across from him, silent witness to his preparations. You should leave, he said finally. Head north to the Jicarilla territory. Find your people. And you? She asked. Samuel closed the compass with a snap. Some of us don't get to outrun our pasts. Naya reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. The touch, deliberate this time, sent warmth through his weathered hands. Then neither do I, she said. 2 weeks after Mercer's visit, Samuel rode into town for supplies, unease settling between his shoulder blades like a physical weight. The streets of Mercy Falls bustled with unusual activity. Wagons loaded with furniture and crates, women hurrying children along the boardwalk. Men gathered in tense clusters. Outside the general store, a crowd surrounded the notice board. Samuel tied his horse, approaching cautiously. At the center of attention was a freshly posted broadsheet, its bold letters visible even from a distance. Apache raid, settlers massacred. A leather-bound Bible clutched in Mrs. Holloway's gnarled hands trembled as she read aloud to those who couldn't. The settlement of Pine Creek was attacked yesterday at dawn. 12 souls, including women and children, were slaughtered. Livestock stolen. Homes burned. Military authorities confirm Apache raiders from North Mountains responsible. Samuel pushed forward, scanning the broadsheet. Pine Creek was barely 30 miles north. They're coming south, someone muttered. Just like 68. Army needs to finish what they started years ago, another voice called. Clean them all out. Samuel felt eyes turning to him, the ex-cavalry officer known to harbor an Apache woman. "You bringing that savage into town today, Ward?" Thomas Gentry, the blacksmith, stood with arms crossed, his massive frame blocking Samuel's path. "She's at the ranch." Convenient timing. As staying put while her people raid. Samuel's hand moved unconsciously toward his gun. "Naya hasn't left the ranch in months. And Pine Creek is Comanche territory, not Apache. Indian's an Indian," Gentry spat. "You've forgotten which side you're on." Sheriff Mills materialized between them, one hand resting casually on his gun belt. "That's enough, Tom. Mr. Ward's business is his own." To Samuel he added quietly, "Though a word of advice might keep your house guest out of sight for a spell." Feelings running high. In the general store, Mrs. Holloway served him with pinched lips and minimal words. As she tallied his purchases, she slid a folded paper across the counter. "Found this by the register this morning. Addressed to you." The note was simple, Romans 13:4, "For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain." Below, crude drawings of a hanging tree and an Apache figure. Samuel crumpled the paper, shoving it into his pocket. "People are scared, Mr. Ward," Mrs. Holloway said, one hand still resting on her Bible. "When they're scared, they look for someone to blame. And I'm convenient. You and that girl," the old woman leaned forward. "I'm no friend to the Apache. Lost my brother at Stone Creek, but I've watched you these past months, bringing her to your place, treating her with respect. Not like some men would." Her eyes held surprising compassion. "Whatever your reasons, I believe they're honorable. But others won't see it that way. Not now." Samuel loaded his supplies quickly. As he mounted his horse, Lieutenant Mercer and his men rode past, now in full uniform. Their eyes met briefly, Mercer's cold smile confirming Samuel's suspicions. The timing of this raid was too perfect. At the ranch, Samuel found Naya repairing a torn dress on the porch. The domesticity of the scene struck him. How natural her presence had become, how the house seemed empty when she wasn't in it. "What happened?" she asked, reading his expression. Samuel hesitated, then handed her the broadsheet. She read it, her face growing still. "It wasn't Apache," she said finally. "I know, but they will blame us anyway." "Yes." She folded the paper carefully. "You believe Mercer is behind this?" "Wouldn't put it past him. Army needs public support to expand operations. Nothing works better than a fresh atrocity." A wagon approached in the distance. Samuel tensed, moving to retrieve his shotgun from inside the door. "Wait," Naya said. "I recognize them." The Henderson family came into view. Frank, his wife Martha, and their teenage son William. Neighbors from 5 miles west, they kept to themselves and had never shown hostility toward Naya. "Samuel," Frank called, pulling up his team. "Thought you should know. Town meeting tonight. Sheriffs deputizing men to protect the area. Some talk of searching outlying properties for Apache sympathizers." "Meaning me," Frank nodded grimly. "Committees forming? Gentry, Phillips, that new banker Hollister? They're calling it community defense." Martha Henderson leaned forward. "There's more." "Riders came through last night, stopped for water. Military scouts, they said. Asked specific questions about you and..." Her eyes flicked to Naya. "Your situation here. You should leave," Frank added. "Both of you, at least until this blows over." Samuel thanked them, watching until their wagon disappeared down the road. Inside, he paced the small front room, mind racing through options. "None seemed good. We should go," Naya said from the doorway. "And go where?" "Army to the north, angry settlers here. West, into the mountains. My mother's people had caves there. Places to hide." Samuel shook his head. "Running makes us look guilty. Besides..." He stopped as hoofbeats sounded outside. A single rider approached, Sheriff Mills. Samuel stepped onto the porch, hand near his gun. "At ease, Ward," Mills called, dismounting slowly. "Just talking today." The sheriff looked tired, dust coating his normally immaculate uniform. He removed his hat, nodding respectfully to Naya. "Ma'am." "Sorry to intrude," Samuel gestured toward the porch chairs. "What brings you out here, Sheriff?" Mills sat heavily. "Warning, mostly. Things in town are ugly. That Pine Creek business has folks on edge. Army's encouraging it. offering bounties for information on hostile Indians in the area. There aren't any. You and I know that. But fear doesn't listen to facts. Mills glanced at Naya. There's talk about your situation here. Deputized men planning to ride out tomorrow. Search the property. They've no right. Rights don't much matter when a mob's formed. Mills leaned forward. I can't stop them legally, but I can warn you. After the sheriff left, Samuel and Naya sat in silence as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Finally she spoke. Why did you really take me in that day? By the creek? The question caught him off guard. What? Was it guilt? Penance for White Rock? Samuel looked at his hands, weathered by years of work and war. At first, maybe. Couldn't leave you there to die. Seemed like balance somehow. And now? Her eyes held his, demanding truth. He stopped. The words caught in his throat. A sound in the distance saved him from answering. Multiple riders approaching fast. Too soon for a town posse. Too many for casual visitors. Inside, he ordered, reaching for his shotgun. From the window, they watched as 6 riders thundered into the yard, Lieutenant Mercer and 5 soldiers in full uniform. They formed a line before the house, rifles ready. Samuel Ward, Mercer called. By order of the United States Army, you're required to surrender any Apache persons on your property, suspected of collaboration with hostiles responsible for the Pine Creek massacre. Samuel checked his shotgun, heart pounding. Stay here, he whispered to Naya, no matter what happens. He stepped onto the porch, shotgun held casually at his side. Lieutenant Mercer, he called. This is private property. The lady here is under my protection and has committed no crime. New orders, Ward. All Apache in the territory are to be brought in for questioning. Failure to comply will be considered aiding the enemy. There is no war, Mercer. The lieutenant smiled thinly. There's always a war out here, Captain. Just depends which side you're on. Samuel raised his shotgun slightly. You're not taking her. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Naya stepped onto the porch beside him. I will go, she said quietly. No. Samuel's voice was firm. They will kill you otherwise. Her hand found his arm. I have done nothing wrong. They will see that. Mercer's laugh cut through the tension. Listen to your woman, Ward. She knows what's good for her. She's not going anywhere, Samuel said, leveling the shotgun. Now get off my property before I forget we once rode together. The standoff stretched, each man calculating the cost of the first shot. Then a new sound, hoofbeats approaching from the west. Sheriff Mills appeared, followed by Frank Henderson and 4 other men from outlying ranches. What's happening here, Lieutenant? Mills called, riding between the soldiers and the house. Military business, Sheriff. Apprehending suspects in the Pine Creek massacre, Mills dismounted calmly. Funny thing about that massacre. Just got word from the territorial governor. Army investigation found evidence it wasn't Apache at all. Bandits from south of the border, disguised to look like Indians. Mercer's face flushed. That's not possible. Our scouts confirmed. Which scouts would those be, Lieutenant? Samuel called. The same ones who've been asking questions about my ranch for weeks. A ripple of unease passed through the soldiers. One leaned toward Mercer, whispering urgently. We have orders, Mercer insisted. Show them, Mills demanded. Because I've got papers from the governor countermanding any such orders. The tableau held for another tense moment before Mercer finally lowered his rifle. This isn't over, Ward. There are proper channels. The army doesn't forget desertion. Neither do I forget false flag operations, Samuel replied evenly. Or using innocent deaths for military advantage. After the soldiers departed, escorted to the boundary by Mills and the ranchers, Samuel and Naya stood alone on the porch, the weight of what had nearly happened settling between them. You would have died protecting me, she said, wonder in her voice. Samuel looked at where her hand still rested on his arm. Yes. Why? The question hung between them as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fierce oranges and reds. The truth he'd been avoiding for months now demanded acknowledgement, because somewhere along the way, he said slowly, keeping you safe became more important than my own life. The dawn after Mercer's attempted raid broke with oppressive heat, the sun rising like a molten coin into a cloudless sky. Samuel stood in the yard, assessing his property with new eyes, not as a home, but as a fortress. Every approach, every weakness, every potential ambush point. "We need to be prepared," he said, as Naya joined him, her hair tied back for the day's work. "Mercer won't give up so easily." She followed his gaze across the open terrain surrounding the ranch. "You think he will return with more men?" "Maybe, or he'll find another way. Bent like that, losing face is worse than losing a fight." In his hands, Samuel held an old leather holster, the leather cracked but supple from years of use. The stitching along one edge had been carefully repaired with sinew, Naya's handiwork from the night before. "This was my father's," Samuel said, running a thumb over the worn leather. "Carried it through the Mexican War. Said it saved his life at Buena Vista when a bullet struck the leather instead of his ribs." Naya studied the holster. "You've never worn it?" "Haven't carried a sidearm since leaving the cavalry. Didn't seem right somehow." He looked up, meeting her eyes. Things are different now. By midday, the transformation had begun. Samuel moved the horses to the corral closest to the house. Naya helped him board up the most vulnerable windows, leaving narrow gaps for observation and defense. They cleared sight lines, moved water barrels inside, prepared for a siege that might never come, or might arrive without warning. After lunch, Samuel retrieved a wooden box from beneath a floorboard in his bedroom. Inside nestled an army Colt revolver, its blued steel still gleaming, unfired since the day he'd deserted. He loaded it methodically, muscles remembering the routine despite the years. "You should know how to use this," he said, finding Naya in the kitchen. She wiped her hands on her apron. "I have never fired a gun." That might need to change. They walked to the edge of the property, where Samuel set up empty cans along a fallen log. He demonstrated first, stance, grip, the smooth pull of the trigger. The shots rang out across the valley, familiar and foreign all at once. When he handed her the revolver, Naya held it gingerly, its weight substantial in her small hands. "It's heavier than it looks," she said. "Death always is." Her first shot went wild. The second kicked up dirt near the targets. By the sixth, she'd managed to graze one can, sending it spinning. "Good," Samuel said, reloading for her. Again. They practiced until the sun began its westward slide, Naya's accuracy improving with each round. Her determination surprised him. The same focused patience she'd shown with the wild stallion now directed at this deadly skill. "Enough for today," he finally said, holstering the Colt in his father's leather. "Your arms will be sore tomorrow." Walking back to the house, their shoulders occasionally brushed, the contact no longer startling to either of them. Something had shifted between them after yesterday's confrontation, a boundary crossed, an admission neither could take back. "Why did you learn to heal if your people were also warriors?" Samuel asked. Naya considered the question. "My grandmother said life and death are not opposites, but partners in the same dance. To understand one, you must know both." She glanced at him. "Your father gave you a gun. My mother gave me medicines, both meant to protect in different ways." That evening, Samuel moved restlessly through the house, checking windows, doors, sight lines. The memory of Mercer's cold smile haunted him, the certainty that this was merely the opening move in a longer game. From the porch, he watched the moon rise, the silver light transforming the landscape into something otherworldly. He didn't hear Naya approach until she stood beside him, close enough that he could smell the sage she'd burned before bed, a ritual he'd come to find comforting. "You should sleep," she said. "Can't. Too much thinking." "About yesterday?" Samuel sighed. "About what I said. That keeping you safe matters more than my own life." He turned to face her. "I meant it. And that terrifies me more than Mercer and all his men." Naya's expression remained unreadable in the moonlight. "Why?" "Because caring about someone means having something to lose again." His voice roughened. "I buried that part of myself at White Rock. Didn't think it would ever come back." Her hand found his in the darkness, fingers intertwining with a certainty that took his breath away. "Some things never truly die," she said. "They just sleep until it's safe to return." Samuel didn't pull away, allowing himself this moment of connection. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the lonely sound echoing across the hills. Later that night, the nightmare returned with vengeance. Samuel thrashed in his bed, trapped in the blood and smoke of White Rock Canyon. The screams, the pleading eyes of women clutching children, his own hands red to the wrists. He woke to gentle hands on his shoulders, Naya's voice pulling him back to the present.
Samuel, wake up.
You're dreaming. Disoriented, he gripped her arms, still half in the nightmare. They were all looking at me. All of them. Asking why. I know, she soothed, not pulling away despite his tight grip. I hear them too. Gradually, reality reasserted itself. The familiar bedroom, the moonlight through the window, Naya kneeling beside his bed, her nightdress ghostly in the silver light. He released her, shame washing over him. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. Some nights are harder than others, she said simply. She started to rise, but Samuel caught her hand. Stay, he whispered, the word barely audible. Just stay. Naya hesitated only a moment before settling beside him on the narrow bed, her back against the headboard, her hand still in his. Neither spoke as the night deepened around them. The silence filled with unspoken truths. By morning, she had returned to her room, leaving only the lingering scent of sage on his pillow and the certainty that something fundamental had changed between them, as irrevocable as the rising sun. 3 weeks passed without sign of Mercer or his men. The heightened vigilance gradually eased into a new routine, though Samuel kept his father's holster buckled at his hip and Naya continued her shooting practice each afternoon. Summer blazed across the land, baking the earth and wilting even the hardiest desert plants, except for Naya's garden. It flourished, despite the heat, a vibrant rectangle of green amid the dusty brown landscape. Samuel watched from the barn doorway as she knelt among the rows, a large straw hat shielding her face, her hands moving with practiced efficiency among the plants. At the center of the garden stood a hand-carved wooden rain gauge. Samuel had fashioned it from cedar, marking careful measurements along its length. A simple tool. Yet Naya had received it with such genuine appreciation that he'd felt awkward beneath her warm gaze. "The corn is ready," she called, noticing him watching. "And there are more beans than we can eat." Samuel approached, surveying the abundance with quiet wonder. Where once had been hard-packed dirt, now thrived corn, beans, squash, tomatoes, herbs, and plants he couldn't name. "Never seen anything grow like this here," he admitted. "Not in 3 years trying." Naya's smile held pride. "You planted alone. These grow better together." She indicated how the corn stalks supported the climbing beans, while the squash spread below, shading the soil. The old way. 3 sisters helping each other. Smart. Yes, my people farmed for generations before. She stopped, the familiar shadow crossing her features. "Before we came," Samuel finished quietly. She nodded, returning to her harvesting. Samuel knelt beside her, helping to fill the basket with ripe beans. Their hands occasionally brushed, the contact no longer startling but welcomed. "Mrs. Henderson from over the ridge came yesterday," Naya said. "While you were checking the north pasture," Samuel frowned. "You shouldn't receive visitors alone, not with things as they are." She was in pain, her joints swollen from the heat. Naya indicated a section of her garden, filled with unfamiliar flowering plants. "I gave her a salve of arnica and willow bark." She cried from relief. "You helped her!" "It is what I was trained to do." She gave him a sidelong glance. "She asked if I would help her daughter next week. The baby comes soon, her first." Samuel sat back on his heels. "That could be dangerous. For both of you, perhaps. Or perhaps healing can build bridges where words cannot." That evening, as they shelled beans on the porch, Samuel watched Naya's profile in the fading light. Something had settled in her these past weeks, a certainty, a purpose rekindled. "Tell me about your training," he said. As a healer, the question seemed to surprise her, but she smiled. "I began at 7 winters following my grandmother, learning which plants heal, which harm, how to listen to the body's stories." Her hands continued their steady rhythm with the beans. "My grandmother could set bones, ease difficult births, draw poison from wounds. She said I had the gift too." Steady hands and a spirit that stays calm in crisis, like when you found me having the nightmare, Samuel said quietly. Their eyes met briefly before Naya continued. A healer sees the whole person, body, spirit, past, present. All connected, she hesitated. In my tradition, illness often comes when these parts fall out of balance. And I'm out of balance, Samuel stated. We all are. Here. Her gesture encompassed not just the two of them, but the larger world beyond. This land remembers old violence. The people carry old fears. You hold old guilt. I bear old grief. None can heal alone. Later that night, a knock at the door startled them both. Samuel reached for his gun while Naya moved into the shadows. Sheriff Mills stood on the porch, hat in hand. Evening, Ward, ma'am. Sheriff. Samuel didn't lower his gun entirely. Kinda late for a social call. This isn't social. Mills looked exhausted, dust coating his usually neat appearance. Came to warn you. Marshal's office sent word. Lieutenant Mercer's been promoted. Captain now. Got himself assigned to Fort Shelton permanently. Samuel felt his stomach tighten. Why? Claims there's increased Apache activity requiring experienced leadership. Mills gave Naya an apologetic glance. But word is, he specifically requested this posting. Made it his personal mission. After the sheriff departed, Samuel paced the front room, tension radiating from him. He's not giving up. Building his case, gathering support. What will we do? Naya asked. The "we" caught Samuel's attention, stopping his pacing. In the lamplight, her face held no fear, only steady resolve that somehow calmed his own racing thoughts. We'll continue as we are, he said finally. No running, no hiding. Naya nodded, rising to stand before him. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up to touch his face, the first such intimate gesture between them. Her fingers were cool against his cheek, smelling of earth and green things. Then we will need more allies, she said. And I will start with the women who need healing. That night, Samuel stood at his window, long after Naya had retired to her room. Outside, her garden gleamed silver in the moonlight, the wooden rain gauge standing sentinel among the thriving plants. A simple thing carved by his hands, transformed by her purpose, like the land itself. Like him, he thought of the women who might come seeking Naya's help, bringing their pain, their difficult births, their sick children. Thought of how walls between people could fall in moments of vulnerability and gratitude. Thought of how a garden grows stronger with diversity than with a single crop. For the first time in years, Samuel considered a future beyond mere survival. A future with purpose. A future where redemption might be possible, not through death, but through life. Through her. The creek that bordered the eastern edge of Samuel's property had been a reliable source of water since he'd settled the land. Even in the driest summers, it had maintained at least a trickle, enough for the cattle and household needs. But as August dragged into September with no rain, even this lifeline began to fail. Samuel stood at the creek's edge, staring at the cracked mud where water had flowed just weeks before. Only a few stagnant pools remained, thick with algae and unfit for drinking. Worst drought in 20 years, Frank Henderson had said when they'd passed on the road yesterday. My well's down 10 feet already. Samuel's well was following the same pattern, water level dropping daily, the bucket coming up half full, then quarter full. 2 more weeks without rain, and they'd be hauling water from town. If the town's wells held out, a copper dowsing rod glinted in the sunlight, abandoned on the creek bank from his morning's futile search for underground water. The slender, Y-shaped branch, wrapped in copper wire to increase its sensitivity, had been a gift from an old prospector years ago. Samuel had always been skeptical of water witching, but desperation made believers of even hardened skeptics. Any success? Naya approached, carrying a canteen. Samuel shook his head, gesturing to the useless dowsing rod. Superstitious nonsense. Should have known better. She handed him the canteen. The water was warm but clean, their daily ration carefully measured now. My people have different ways of finding water, she said, surveying the parched landscape. Like dowsing? No, we watch what lives. Plants that need moisture grow where water sleeps beneath the ground. She pointed to a cluster of cottonwoods in the distance. Those trees, why do they thrive while others die? Samuel considered them. A small grove he'd always taken for granted. Deeper roots, I assumed. Yes, but they know where to send those roots. Trees are wise that way. That afternoon they rode to the cottonwood grove. Samuel brought shovels, picks, the copper dowsing rod more from habit than belief. Naya brought only her quiet observation, studying the lay of the land, the pattern of growth, the subtle signs he'd never thought to read. Here, she said finally, indicating a spot where the largest cottonwoods clustered. The ground dipped slightly. Water flows downhill, even underground. Samuel was doubtful but began to dig. 3 feet down, the soil changed, becoming darker, then damp. At 5 feet, water began to seep into the hole. "I'll be damned," he whispered. By sunset, they had dug a proper well, 8 feet deep with clear, sweet water rising steadily from below. Samuel's arms ached from digging, his shirt soaked with sweat, but satisfaction ran deeper than the fatigue. "We'll build a proper well housing tomorrow," he said, as they rode home in the gathering dusk. "Need to protect it from animals, debris." Naya rode behind him on the gelding, her arms light around his waist, her body swaying with his in the rhythm of the horse's gait. The casual intimacy no longer felt foreign, just right somehow. "Your people," Samuel said carefully. "They taught you to read the land this way?" "Yes. Children learn early which plants mean water is near, which berries are safe, which tracks to follow or avoid." There was sadness in her voice, but pride too. Knowledge earned over generations. Samuel thought of all that had been lost, not just lives, but wisdom accumulated over centuries. Knowledge he and others like him had dismissed as primitive, unworthy of preservation. "Thank you," he said simply, "for sharing this with me." Her arms tightened briefly around his waist, acknowledgement of what remained unspoken between them. 2 days later, they took their first trip to town together. The new well provided enough water for their immediate needs, but supplies were running low, and the repaired wagon wheel couldn't wait any longer. "You don't have to come," Samuel said as they loaded the wagon. Town might not be friendly. Naya tied her hair back with a ribbon, one of Martha Henderson's gifts after Naya had eased her arthritic pain. "If I stay hidden, nothing changes. Besides," she added with the hint of a smile, "someone must make sure you get the right fabric for new curtains." Despite his concerns, Samuel found himself looking forward to showing her Mercy Falls. The town was small, but had its charms, the church bell that rang on the hour, Mrs. Holloway's ice cream on Saturdays, the shade of the old oak by the courthouse. Heads turned as they drove down Main Street, conversation halting, then resuming in hurried whispers. Samuel kept his hand near his gun, eyes scanning for trouble, but found only the expected stares and murmurs. At the general store, Mrs. Holloway's eyebrows rose at the sight of Naya, but she offered a curt nod of acknowledgement. "Mr. Ward, Miss." She turned to Samuel. "What'll you be needing today?" As Samuel listed their supplies, a group of men entered, led by Thomas Gentry. The blacksmith stopped short at the sight of Naya, his face darkening. "Well, look here. Ward's brought his pet savage to town." Gentry's voice carried deliberately. "Guess we're all supposed to pretend that's proper." Samuel turned slowly. "We're just here for supplies, Gentry. No trouble. Trouble came when you decided Indians belong in town." Gentry took a step closer. "Or in a white man's bed." Samuel's hand moved to his gun, but Naya touched his arm, a gentle restraint. She faced Gentry with quiet dignity. "Your wife," she said calmly. "She suffers headaches. Behind the eyes. Worse when the weather changes." Gentry blinked, thrown off balance. "What do you know about my wife?" "Martha Henderson told me. I have medicine that might help. Plants that grow near water." She reached into her pocket, producing a small cloth packet. "Steep in hot water. Like tea." The blacksmith stared at the offering, confusion warring with ingrained prejudice on his weathered face. "Thomas Gentry," Mrs. Holloway cut in. "Your wife's been suffering those headaches for 3 years. Doctor couldn't do a thing. You might show some Christian charity to someone offering help." A long moment passed before Gentry grudgingly took the packet. Without another word, he turned and left. His companions trailing behind in awkward silence, Mrs. Holloway sniffed. "Well, that's the first time I've seen that man speechless." She gave Naya an appraising look. "You really know about headache remedies?" "Yes, and for joint pain, fever, difficult births." Something shifted in the older woman's stern countenance. Not quite a smile, but a softening. "My sister's time is coming next month." "Her third. Last two were hard." A pause. "She lives just outside town," Naya nodded. "If she wishes, I can help." That night, riding home with a wagon full of supplies, Samuel watched Naya's profile against the setting sun. "You handled gentry better than I would have," she smiled. "Sometimes healing works where force would fail." The copper dowsing rod lay forgotten in the back of the wagon, replaced by something far more valuable: knowledge, understanding, and the growing certainty that their futures were now irreversibly intertwined. October brought the first cool mornings, frost glittering on the grass as Samuel stepped onto the porch with his coffee. 4 months since he'd found Naya by Bitter Creek. 4 months that had transformed his solitary existence into something he barely recognized, yet couldn't imagine living without. Inside, he heard her moving about the kitchen, the familiar sounds of breakfast preparation mingling with her soft humming. The domesticity of it still startled him sometimes, how naturally she had become part of this place, how empty it would feel without her. Samuel's gaze drifted to the small wooden cross marking a grave at the edge of the property. His wife Sarah, dead 8 years now from frontier fever. He hadn't spoken of her to Naya, had barely allowed himself to remember. Some wounds were easier left untouched. The creak of the door announced Naya's presence. "Food is ready," she said, then followed his gaze to the distant grave. "You visit her in the mornings." It wasn't a question, but Samuel nodded. "Old habit." "What was her name?" "Sarah." Speaking it aloud felt strange after so long. Sarah Elizabeth Ward. Naya stood beside him, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill. "You loved her very much." "Yes." Samuel sipped his coffee, memories surfacing like stones in spring thaw. "She wasn't meant for frontier life. Too gentle. But she followed me out here anyway, because she loved you. Foolishly, perhaps." Naya's hand found his arm, these small touches now commonplace between them. "Love is never foolish, even when it brings pain." Later that morning, rain clouds gathered on the horizon, the first promise of moisture in months. Samuel worked in the barn, repairing tack while Naya organized her dried herbs and medicines. The growing collection lined the shelves he'd built along one wall, each bundle neatly labeled in her careful handwriting. When the first heavy drops began to fall, Naya rushed outside, face turned upward to the sky. Samuel watched from the doorway as she spread her arms wide, welcoming the rain with childlike joy. Something tight in his chest loosened at the sight. Her unguarded happiness, a gift he hadn't known he needed. The downpour drove them inside by midday, the steady drumming on the roof creating a cocoon of sound around the small house. Samuel built up the fire against the unusual chill, while Naya brewed tea from her stores. As they sat before the hearth, Samuel noticed a book in her hands, one he hadn't seen before. "What's that?" he asked. Naya held it up, revealing worn leather binding embossed with a single word: Psalms. "I found it on your shelf," she said. "The markings inside, they are like the ones at the mission school, but different." Samuel recognized it immediately, the small devotional his mother had pressed into his hands when he left for the army. He'd carried it through 2 wars, then shelved it upon settling the ranch, its comfort insufficient for the weight of his deeds. "It's called a Psalter," he explained. "Just one book from the Christian Bible, the songs and poems." Naya opened it carefully, fingers tracing the faded handwriting in the margins. "Your marks?" "Some, others were my mother's." He hesitated. "Can you read it?" "Some words." The mission taught reading. A shadow crossed her face. "To remake us in their image." Samuel moved to sit beside her. "These words weren't meant for remaking. They're about finding your way when lost." He gently took the book, turning to a dog-eared page. This one comforted my mother when my father was at war. Together, they looked at Psalm 23, its familiar words smudged from years of handling. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." "What does it mean, shepherd?" Naya asked. "One who guides and protects, like a father perhaps, or a guardian spirit in your tradition." Naya considered this. "Your people believe in one spirit?" "Not many. One God, yes, though some say he has 3 parts. Samuel smiled slightly. "It confused me as a child too. At the mission they said our beliefs were evil, that we must forget the old ways to be saved." Her voice held no bitterness, just a quiet sadness. "Men twist faith to their purposes," Samuel said. "Use it to justify what can't be justified. I've seen it in war too often." Rain lashed against the windows as they sat side by side, the small psalter between them. Naya's questions came steadily about heaven and hell, prayer and forgiveness, the strange customs of Christian worship. Samuel answered as best he could, aware of his own inadequacies as a theological guide. "Your people believe in sacred places," he said finally, "where the divine touches earth. My mother believed God could be found anywhere. In a church, yes, but also in a quiet heart or an act of kindness." "This I understand," Naya nodded. "The Creator's breath is in all living things." The mission father said this was primitive thinking. The mission fathers were wrong about many things. Samuel's voice hardened. "What was done to your people, to children taken from families, languages forbidden, none of that comes from true faith." As evening fell, the rain continued its steady percussion on the roof. They prepared dinner together, moving around the small kitchen with practiced ease, their conversation shifting to lighter topics: the harvest, winter preparations, plans for improving the corral. Later, as Samuel stoked the fire for the night, Naya approached with the psalter in her hands. "Would you read more?" she asked. "The words have a beauty, even when I don't understand fully." Samuel hesitated, then nodded. They settled before the fire, shoulders touching, as he began to read aloud. The familiar cadences filled the room, mingling with the sound of rain and wind. Words of ancient desert peoples, speaking across time to this improbable pair on the American frontier. When Naya's hand slipped into his, Samuel didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally, a simple connection that somehow felt profound. They sat in companionable silence after the reading, watching flames dance in the hearth. "Your God and my Creator," Naya said softly. "Perhaps they know each other well." Samuel looked at their joined hands, then at her face, gilded by firelight. "Perhaps they brought us together for reasons beyond our understanding." It was the closest he had come to speaking of what grew between them, this fragile, unexpected bond neither had sought, yet both now cherished. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the dust from the land, preparing the earth for renewal. The first snow fell in early November, a light dusting that transformed the ranch into a strange, muffled world. Samuel woke to find Naya already on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her breath fogging in the cold air as she watched the flakes settle on the land. "First snow is sacred," she explained when he joined her. "It covers all tracks, gives the earth rest. A time for stories and reflection." Samuel nodded, understanding the appeal of such belief. In the pristine whiteness, the ranch looked untouched by human hand, the way it must have appeared to her ancestors generations ago. Before men like him came with flags and fences, they had almost forgotten about Mercer in the weeks of quiet that followed their confrontation. Almost. But as Samuel rode into town that morning for winter supplies, the weight of watchful eyes reminded him that peace was always provisional on the frontier. Sheriff Mills intercepted him outside the general store, his expression grim beneath his frosted mustache. "Trouble coming?" "Ward," he said quietly, leading Samuel away from curious ears. "Army patrol rode through yesterday, asking specific questions about you." Samuel's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm. "Mercer?" "Not with them. But his fingerprints were all over it." Mills glanced around before continuing. "They had a document with them." Caught just a glimpse, but it looked official. Military letterhead. What kind of document? Couldn't see clearly, but they were showing it to Gentry, that new banker Hollister, few others. The sheriff's eyes were troubled. Whatever it is, they're building support before making a move. Samuel thanked him and finished his errands quickly, anxiety building like the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. A heavier snow was coming. He could feel it in the air, in the restlessness of his horse. As he loaded the last supplies, something caught his eye, a notice tacked to the town bulletin board that hadn't been there on his last visit. Stepping closer, his blood ran cold, a wanted poster. His own face stared back at him, younger but unmistakable. Beneath bold lettering, "Deserter, U.S. Cavalry." Below, smaller print detailed his service, the date of desertion, and the standing reward for information leading to his apprehension. 100. The poster was weathered, clearly printed years ago when he first deserted. But someone had recently added a fresh note across the bottom in red ink: "Known Apache sympathizer, currently harboring enemy combatants." Samuel tore the poster down, crumpling it into his pocket as he mounted his horse. The storm clouds had swallowed the sun now, the temperature dropping rapidly as he urged his mount homeward. Naya knew something was wrong the moment he entered. She took the supplies without comment, waiting until he'd unsaddled his horse and warmed himself by the fire before asking, "What happened in town?" Samuel pulled the crumpled poster from his pocket, smoothing it on the table between them. Naya studied it silently, her expression unreadable. "They never stopped looking for you," she said finally. "They didn't care about one deserter. Not until now." Samuel paced the small room, tension radiating from him. "This is Mercer's doing. Building a case, making me a target, because of me. No, because of him." Samuel stopped pacing, facing her directly. This was always his fight. "You're just convenient ammunition." Outside, the snow began falling in earnest, thick flakes swirling in the rising wind. By nightfall, it had become a true blizzard, howling around the small house as if seeking entrance. They ate dinner to the accompaniment of rattling windows and creaking timbers. "No one will travel in this," Naya said, nodding toward the storm outside. "We have time to think." Samuel wasn't so sure. The poster had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He'd known the risk of desertion when he rode away from White Rock Canyon, had accepted it as the price of keeping his humanity intact. But that was when he'd had only himself to consider. Now there was Naya. "If they come for me officially," he said, "there's little I can do. Military law is clear on desertion." Naya's eyes met his across the table. "Then we leave. Before they come. And go where? Winter's setting in. We'd never make it to the territories. There are other places. My mother's people had caves in the Red Mountains, places the white soldiers never found." Samuel shook his head. "I won't take you back to living in caves. You deserve better. Better than what?" "Than freedom." Naya's voice held an edge he rarely heard. "I lived in their idea of better at the mission school. Beds with clean sheets, while our spirits withered. No more." The conviction in her voice silenced him. This woman had survived massacre, displacement, forced assimilation, and still stood straight, still held to her truths. While he, with all his privileges, had been running from one moment of moral clarity for 8 years. That night, as the storm reached its peak, Samuel sat cleaning his firearms by lamplight. The wanted poster lay on the table beside an old brass key, the last remnant of his military trunk, long since abandoned in his flight from White Rock. Naya watched from across the room as she mended a torn shirt, her needle flashing in the lamp's glow. "If they take you," she asked suddenly, "what happens?" Samuel didn't look up from his gun. "Military tribunal, likely prison. Fort Leavenworth, probably. And to me?" Now he did look up, meeting her gaze. "Back to a reservation. Or worse, the mission school." The thought hung between them, heavy as the snow blanketing the world outside. Neither spoke for a long while, the only sounds the scrape of the cleaning rod, the tiny whisper of thread through fabric. "We won't let that happen," Samuel said finally, the decision crystallizing even as he spoke. Either outcome. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. They froze, eyes locked in sudden alarm. Who could possibly be traveling in such a storm? Samuel motioned Naya toward the back room, gun in hand, as he approached the door. "Who's there?" "Mills," came the muffled reply. "Let me in before I freeze solid." The sheriff stumbled in on a gust of snow and wind, his coat white, his mustache frosted with ice. "Sorry to bring this storm with me," he said, stamping his boots. "But it couldn't wait till morning." From his coat, he produced an official-looking document sealed with the army insignia. "Arrest warrant," he said grimly. "For both of you." They're coming at first thaw. Sheriff Mills departed before dawn, leaving the arrest warrant on Samuel's table, official army letterhead bearing Captain Mercer's signature alongside a territorial judge's. The charges were clear: desertion for Samuel, harboring a fugitive from the reservation system for both of them. 3 days, Mills had said. That's how long this storm's predicted to last. After that they'll come, Mercer with army backing and a posse of civilians for good measure. The sheriff had offered no solutions, only a warning born of respect. "Whatever you decide to do it before the road's clear." Now, as morning light filtered through the snow-crusted windows, Samuel and Naya sat facing each other across the table, the warrant between them like a living thing. "We need to leave," Samuel said. "We head into the mountains before the storm breaks." Naya shook her head. "The passes will be blocked. We would freeze before finding shelter. Better than what waits here, is it?" Her dark eyes held his. "Running means living always in fear, looking over our shoulders, never having home again." Samuel had no answer. He'd been running for 8 years, from White Rock, from his own conscience. The thought of pulling Naya into that same rootless existence sickened him. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault, snow piling against the windows, wind finding every crack in the cabin's construction. Forced stillness settled over them as the day progressed, no chores possible beyond feeding the animals in the nearby barn. By evening, the small house felt more confining than usual, their predicament inescapable, despite the vastness of white beyond the walls. Samuel paced while Naya calmly prepared their evening meal, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic in their precision. "How can you be so calm?" he finally asked. "Knowing what's coming?" She looked up from the stove. "I have faced the end of my world before," she said simply. "When the soldiers came to White Rock, when they took the children to the mission schools, each time I thought, this is the last day of living as myself." Her hands continued their work, steady and sure. "Yet here I stand, still myself." Her quiet strength humbled him. As night fell, temperatures plummeted further. Samuel added logs to the fire, building it higher than usual against the penetrating cold. Still, drafts found their way through the cabin walls, chilling the farthest corners of the room. "We should conserve firewood," Naya said. "The storm may last longer than predicted. There's plenty stacked by the barn, unreachable if the snow gets much deeper." Samuel hadn't considered this. In 8 years on the ranch, he'd never experienced a blizzard this severe, this sustained. The practicalities of survival suddenly seemed more pressing than even Mercer's warrant. That night, with the temperature still falling, Samuel arranged blankets before the hearth. "You take the bedrooms," he told Naya. "They're warmer with the doors closed. And you will sleep here? The coldest part of the house?" "I've slept in worse conditions." Naya studied him for a moment, then disappeared into her room without argument. Samuel settled on his makeshift pallet, watching firelight play across the ceiling, mind churning with impossible choices. Hours later, he woke to Naya standing over him, arms laden with quilts and blankets. "What?" he began. "It's too cold for either room," she said. "The fire is the only sensible place tonight." Before he could protest, she had arranged her bedding beside his, creating a nest of quilts and blankets before the hearth. The large, hand-stitched quilt she spread over both pallets, a wedding gift to Samuel and Sarah years ago, stored away after her death, until Naya had discovered it in the trunk last month. The quilt's familiar pattern, interlocking stars in blue and cream, brought a rush of memory. Sarah working by lamplight through winter evenings, the pride in her eyes when she'd finished it, the way it had covered their first bed in this very house. "I can't," Samuel started. "It's just a blanket," Naya said, reading his hesitation. "And tonight it's the difference between comfort and freezing." She settled beside him, a respectful distance maintained between their bodies, yet close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. Outside, the wind howled like lost souls, rattling the windows in their frames. "In my village," Naya said softly, staring at the fire, "families would gather like this during the worst storms. Grandparents, parents, children, all together around the central fire, sharing warmth, sharing stories." "What stories?" Samuel asked, grateful for the distraction from their proximity. "Creation stories. How coyote stole fire. Why rabbit has long ears." She smiled at some private memory. "My grandmother knew stories that took 3 nights to tell properly." "Tell me one," he said impulsively. Naya turned to look at him, surprise evident in her expression. Then she nodded, settling more comfortably beneath the quilt. "I will tell you how first woman brought healing plants to the people," she began, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality that made Samuel think of streams flowing over smooth stones. The story unwound between them, filling the small cabin with images of a world before this one, when animals spoke, when the mountains were young, when the boundaries between the seen and unseen remained permeable. Samuel listened, transported despite himself, the warrant on the table temporarily forgotten. As Naya's voice grew softer with fatigue, they shifted closer together, the cold driving them toward shared warmth. The quilt encircled them both now, no space between their shoulders, their arms, their hands. "It's a good story," Samuel said when she finished, aware of her nearness in a way that made his heart beat faster. "Just one of many," she murmured, her eyes heavy with approaching sleep. When she drifted off, her head came to rest naturally against his shoulder. Samuel remained awake, listening to the storm, feeling the gentle rhythm of her breathing against him. The quilt around them held the heat of their bodies, creating a cocoon of warmth in defiance of the freezing world outside. In that moment, despite the warrant, despite Mercer's approaching reckoning, Samuel felt something he'd thought lost forever, the simple, profound comfort of not being alone. The blizzard raged for 4 days, not 3 as predicted, burying the ranch beneath drifts taller than a man. When it finally broke, the world emerged transformed, blindingly white, eerily silent, the familiar landscape rendered foreign beneath its frozen mantle. Samuel stood on the porch at dawn, surveying what he could see of his property. The barn was half buried, the corral fences barely visible. In the distance, where the road should be, only an unbroken field of white stretched toward town. "No one will travel that for at least a day," Naya said, joining him. "Maybe 2. The time had been a strange gift, 4 days of shared warmth by the fire, of stories exchanged, of meals prepared together from dwindling supplies. 4 days of growing closer in ways neither had anticipated. 4 days of forgetting almost what waited on the other side of the storm. Now reality reasserted itself. Samuel turned to her, his decision made during the long night. "We're leaving. Today, while the snow keeps them at bay." Naya studied his face. "Where?" "South. New Mexico territory, then maybe Mexico proper." He thought it through carefully. "Mercer's authority ends at the border. We can start fresh, where no one knows our histories." She didn't immediately agree or disagree, just watched him with those dark, considering eyes. "The horses can manage the snow? If we stick to the ridge lines where the wind has swept it thinner, it won't be easy, but we can make the territorial line in 4 days if we push." Naya nodded slowly. "When do we leave?" "Midday. Need to prepare the horses. Pack only what's essential." They worked methodically through the morning, Samuel readying the horses, selecting weapons, packing food and ammunition, while Naya gathered medicines, warm clothing, essential tools. Neither spoke much, the weight of leaving hanging between them. As Samuel saddled the horses, a flicker of movement on the northern horizon caught his eye. A single rider approaching slowly through the deep snow. "Someone's coming," he called to Naya. And moving to his gun, they watched the rider's laborious progress, horse and human struggling through drifts. occasionally disappearing from view only to emerge again, closer each time. Not a military uniform, Samuel noted with relief. A civilian bundled against the cold. Might be Mills, he said, or one of the Hendersons, but as the rider drew nearer, he realized it was neither. The figure was too slight, the horse unfamiliar. A stranger, pushing determinedly toward their isolated ranch through nearly impassable conditions. Samuel positioned himself on the porch, rifle in hand, as the rider finally reached their yard. "That's far enough," he called. "State your business." The rider stopped, then slowly dismounted, boots sinking deep into the snow. Gloved hands rose to pull back a snow-crusted scarf, revealing the face of a young man, hardly more than 20, with the distinctive bearing of military training despite his civilian clothes. "Samuel Ward." The young man called. "Who's asking?" "Corporal James Blackwood, sir. Former 6th Cavalry." The young man reached carefully into his coat. "I bring a message." Samuel kept his rifle trained as Blackwood extracted an envelope, thick, official-looking, sealed with red wax. "From who?" "Colonel Edmund Pierce, retired. Former commander of the 6th. The name hit Samuel like a physical blow. Colonel Pierce had been his mentor, his commanding officer before White Rock Canyon. The man who had taught him everything about cavalry tactics and frontier warfare. The man whose orders he had ultimately defied. "Approach slowly," Samuel directed, curiosity overcoming caution. The young corporal trudged through the snow, extending the envelope. "Colonel Pierce said it's for your eyes only, sir." Samuel lowered his rifle to accept the letter. The wax seal was indeed Pierce's, the distinctive P surrounded by crossed sabers that Samuel remembered from countless orders and dispatches. "How did Pierce know where to find me?" "He's always known, sir." Blackwood stamped his feet against the cold. "Said he's been keeping tabs on you since you left." Samuel gestured toward the house. "Come in before you freeze, my—" He hesitated, uncertain how to introduce Naya. "We'll get you warmed up." Inside, Naya moved efficiently, preparing coffee for the frozen messenger, while Samuel broke the seal on Pierce's letter. The heavy parchment crackled as he unfolded it, revealing the colonel's distinctive, precise handwriting. The letter was brief but electric in its implications. "Ward, this serves as official notification that a full pardon for your desertion has been approved and signed by the President. Your service record has been amended to show honorable discharge effective the date of your departure from the 6th. This comes at considerable political expense, called in as the final favor of my career. Do not squander it. The bearer carries official documentation to this effect. He also carries something else you should know. Captain Mercer's career now hangs by a thread due to his unauthorized actions in your territory. The Apache raids were his fabrication, designed to justify expansion of military presence for his personal advancement. However, I must warn you, Mercer knows of your pardon and is moving quickly. He intends to seize the Apache woman before the pardon can be properly registered. His plan, as I understand it, is to remove her to a reservation far from your influence, where his actions will face little scrutiny. My advice, for what it's worth, leave immediately. The pardon covers only you, not her. The law remains unchanged regarding unauthorized Apache living outside reservation boundaries. I could not save you at White Rock. Perhaps this partial atonement will suffice." Pierce Samuel read the letter twice, his hands trembling slightly. A pardon, freedom from the desertion charge that had hung over him for 8 years. The ability to walk openly in any town without fear of arrest, but only for him, not for Naya. "Samuel." Her voice pulled him from his thoughts. "What does it say?" He looked up to find both Naya and Corporal Blackwood watching him expectantly. The young soldier reached into his coat again, producing a second, larger envelope. "The official pardon, sir. Signed and sealed." Blackwood placed it on the table, then added hesitantly, "And there's something else you should know. Captain Mercer departed Fort Shelton yesterday morning with a detachment of 6 men. They're on their way here now." Samuel's mind raced. Even with the deep snow, Mercer could reach the ranch by tomorrow, if determined enough. And Mercer was certainly determined. How far behind you is he? Hard to say with the snow, sir. I took a more direct route through Miller's Pass, risky in this weather, but faster. The captain will need to circle around with his men. Gives you perhaps a day's advantage, no more. Samuel turned to Naya, who had been watching silently. We need to leave now. Not midday. Now, she nodded, already moving to collect their packed supplies. To Blackwood, Samuel said. You're welcome to shelter here until it's safer to travel. There's food, firewood. The young corporal shook his head. Thank you, sir, but I should report back to the colonel. He'll want to know you received the pardon. As Blackwood prepared to depart, Samuel impulsively pressed Pierce's letter into the young man's hand. Burn this. If Mercer finds it, he'll know you warned us. 20 minutes later, they watched the corporal disappear back into the vast whiteness. Samuel held the official pardon in his hands, heavy parchment emblazoned with the presidential seal, his name written in formal calligraphy, the word pardoned prominent across the top. What does it mean? Naya asked, eyeing the document. It means I'm no longer a deserter in the eyes of the law. Samuel folded the pardon carefully, tucking it inside his coat. But it doesn't change anything for you? In their eyes, you're still a fugitive from the reservation system. Her expression remained steady. So we still leave? Yes, but now we have options. Samuel checked his gun one final time. We can go south as planned. Or we can fight this legally once we're somewhere safe. The pardon gives me standing I didn't have before. As they mounted their horses, supplies secured behind their saddles, Samuel took one last look at the ranch he'd built with his own hands. The house where Sarah had died, the land he'd worked for years in solitary penance. Strange how little pain he felt at leaving it behind. Ready? He asked Naya. She nodded, adjusting her scarf against the biting cold. Which way? Samuel hesitated only briefly. South. We'll follow the ridge line as planned. They rode in silence, breaking trail through the deep snow, each lost in private thoughts. The official pardon crinkled against Samuel's chest with each movement of his horse, a weight lifted, yet somehow replaced by a heavier responsibility. After an hour of difficult travel, they stopped to rest the horses on a ridge overlooking the valley. From this vantage point, they could see for miles the distant smudge of Mercy Falls. The winding path they'd traveled, and most alarmingly, a group of riders approaching from the north. Mercer, Samuel said grimly. Moving faster than Blackwood estimated. Naya shaded her eyes, counting. 7 riders. Military formation. He must have pushed through the night. Samuel's mind worked rapidly, calculating distances, options. They'll reach the ranch by nightfall. Discover we're gone. Pick up our trail by morning. We cannot outrun them with horses in this snow, Naya said, practical as always. Not for long. She was right. Their mounts were already laboring, and they'd covered barely 5 miles. At this pace, Mercer would overtake them well before they reached the territorial border. Samuel's hand went to the pardon inside his coat. With sudden decision, he pulled it out, staring at the official document that restored his honor, his freedom. What are you thinking? Naya asked, watching his face closely. That running isn't the answer. Samuel's jaw set with determination. Never has been. Then what is? He looked at her, this woman who had somehow become the center of his world. Standing our ground. But not at the ranch. Somewhere of our choosing. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The caves. Where my people went in times of danger. Yes. Can you lead us there? Naya nodded, her expression solemn yet somehow lighter. We would have shelter, defensible position, knowledge they don't possess. Samuel folded the pardon again, tucking it securely away. Then that's our destination. As they turned their horses west, toward the red rock formations in the distance, Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not resignation to fate, but determination to forge his own. Not running from the past, but facing the future. Whatever came next, they would meet it together. The western mountains rose like ancient sentinels against the sky, their red stone faces partially obscured by lingering snow. Samuel followed Naya's lead as they picked their way through narrow passes and hidden trails, paths known only to her people, unmarked on any military map. By nightfall, they had covered less than 10 miles. the deep snow and treacherous terrain slowing their progress to a crawl. They made camp in the shelter of a sandstone overhang, building a small, nearly smokeless fire with techniques Naya had learned as a child. "Mercer will have reached the ranch by now," Samuel said, warming his hands over the flames. "Found it abandoned." Naya nodded, her face solemn in the flickering light. "Tomorrow he will find our trail." "How much farther to the caves?" "Half a day if the snow thins." "The caves lie there." She pointed toward a distant mesa, barely visible in the moonlight. "My people used them for generations before the soldiers came." Samuel studied the terrain with a soldier's eye, noting approaches, vantage points, natural barriers. Good defensive position, difficult to assault directly. If they could reach it before Mercer caught up, they might stand a chance. From his saddlebag, Samuel retrieved a small brass spyglass, compact enough for cavalry reconnaissance, powerful enough to spot movement at considerable distance. The instrument had been standard issue for officers, though Samuel had modified his, adding leather wrapping for better grip and a custom lens cap that wouldn't reflect sunlight. "We'll take turns watching through the night," he said, extending the spyglass to scan their back trail. 4 hours each. "I'll take first watch." Naya wrapped herself in blankets near the fire, though sleep seemed unlikely for either of them. The weight of their situation pressed down, like the snow around them. 7 trained soldiers in pursuit, led by a man whose hatred had festered for years. "If they catch us before we reach the caves," Naya said quietly, "what then?" Samuel lowered the spyglass, considering. "I show them the pardon. Force Mercer to acknowledge it. And if he doesn't?" The question hung between them. They both knew Mercer wasn't driven by law or duty, but by something darker, more personal. "Then I'll buy you time to reach the caves," Samuel said finally. Naya sat up, her expression fierce even in the dim light. "No, we stay together. Naya, I will not run while you face them alone." Her voice left no room for argument. "That is not our way forward, our way." The simple phrase struck Samuel with unexpected force. When had they become an our, a we, instead of 2 separate souls traveling parallel paths? He couldn't pinpoint the moment, only knew with certainty that turning back was now impossible. Midway through Samuel's watch, a flicker of light in the valley below caught his attention. Through the spyglass, he could make out the distant glow of campfires, multiple points of light clustered near what must be his ranch. "They're at the house," he told Naya when she woke for her watch. "Probably waiting for dawn to track us." She took the spyglass, studying the distant lights. 7 fires. Mercer has not split his forces. Good. Means we only need to watch one approach. As Naya kept vigil, Samuel tried to rest, but sleep proved elusive. His mind churned with strategies, contingencies, memories of military campaigns in similar terrain. If they could reach the caves by midday tomorrow, they could prepare properly, set traps, establish fields of fire, use the natural defenses to maximum advantage. Just before dawn, Naya woke him with a gentle touch. "Someone is coming." Samuel was instantly alert, hand moving to his gun. "Mercer already?" "No, from the west. Single rider." Through the spyglass, Samuel spotted the approaching figure, a lone horseman picking a careful path through the snow, coming not from the direction of the ranch, but from deeper in the territory. As the rider drew nearer, details became clearer. Civilian clothes, no visible weapons. Familiar posture. "Sheriff Mills," Samuel said with surprise, lowering the glass. They waited as the sheriff approached their position, making no effort to hide their location. Mills had proven himself an ally, and if he'd managed to track them this far, concealment was already compromised. "Thought I might find you headed this way," Mills said as he dismounted, stamping his feet against the cold. "Saw your tracks veering west instead of south. How did you know to look for us at all?" Samuel asked, suspicious despite their previous alliance. "That young corporal, Blackwood, ran into him on his way back east. He didn't say much, but I could read between the lines." Mills glanced between them. "Figured you could use some advance intelligence on Mercer." The sheriff nodded grimly. "He's got more than just his soldiers now. recruited gentry and 3 other men from town as civilian deputies. They're calling it a posse to apprehend fugitives. Samuel felt his stomach tighten. Civilian involvement complicated matters significantly. The pardon might keep military hands tied, but frontier justice operated by different rules. Why would townsfolk join him? Naya asked. We've done nothing to them. Fear's a powerful motivator, Mills said. Mercer's been spinning tales about Apache uprisings, telling folks you're connected to raiding parties further north. He turned to Samuel. And for you, he's painting a picture of a deserter turned traitor, feeding military intelligence to hostiles. That's absurd, Samuel snapped. Anyone who knows me, doesn't matter what's true, Mills interrupted. Only what people believe when they're scared. Samuel paced the small camp, mind racing. How long before they pick up our trail? They were preparing to move out at first light. Gentry's got his hunting dogs with him, those bloodhounds that tracked the Johnson boy last spring. Naya and Samuel exchanged alarmed glances. Dogs would make concealing their trail nearly impossible. We need to move, Samuel said. Now, before they get the scent. As they hastily packed their meager camp, Sheriff Mills produced a folded map from his coat, a detailed survey of the Western Territory that included topographical features. Water sources and known trails. Thought this might help, he said, spreading it on a flat rock. Where exactly are you headed? Naya hesitated, years of cultural secrecy warring with their present need. Finally, she pointed to an unmarked area near the mesa. There, ancient caves, hidden from casual view. Mills studied the location. Rough country. Hard to approach without being seen. He traced potential routes with a weathered finger. Mercer will likely follow the main valley, assuming you're headed for the territorial border. Might buy you a few hours if they head wrong initially. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape, the 3 mounted their horses. I'll ride south a ways, Mills said. Leave some false tracks, maybe draw off those hounds. That's a risk, Samuel warned. If Mercer discovers you helped us, been sheriff in Mercy Falls for 17 years, Mills interrupted. About time I decided which side of justice I'm actually on. They parted ways at the next ridge, Mills heading south, Samuel and Naya continuing west toward the distant mesa. As they rode, Samuel kept the brass spyglass handy, periodically scanning their back trail for pursuit. The pardon inside his coat seemed to grow heavier with each mile, a reminder that his own freedom was no longer the prize at stake, but something far more precious. By midday, the mesa loomed before them, its red stone face streaked with snow and shadow. The horses labored through deepening drifts as the terrain grew steeper, more treacherous. Samuel dismounted to lead his gelding over particularly difficult stretches, Naya following suit with the quiet competence that had become familiar to him. There, she said suddenly, pointing to what appeared to be a natural crevice in the rock face. The path begins. Samuel would have missed it entirely without her guidance, a narrow fissure barely wide enough for a horse, partially concealed by wind-sculptured snowdrifts and the play of light on stone. They led their mounts into the passage, which soon widened into a sheltered ravine winding upward through the mesa. My grandmother brought me here as a child, Naya explained as they ascended. Said our people had used these caves since before the Spanish came. The path grew steeper, forcing them to stop frequently to rest the horses. At one particularly narrow section, Naya halted, studying the rock wall with practiced eyes. We should leave signs, she said, in case others come seeking refuge. From her saddlebag, she produced a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth from handling. Samuel had seen her with it before, opening it briefly in the evenings, closing it before he could glimpse its contents. She removed the lid now, revealing a collection of vibrant pigments, ochre, white, deep red, and black. My mother's colors, she explained, seeing his interest. For ceremonies, stories, prayers. The last of what I carried from White Rock. With practiced fingers, Naya mixed a small amount of red ochre with water from her canteen. She approached the rock face, applying the pigment in a pattern Samuel couldn't decipher, curves and lines that seemed random to his untrained eye. What does it mean? he asked. Safe passage for those who come in peace. She completed the design with a final brush of her fingertip. And a warning for those who don't. Samuel couldn't help but smile. Will Mercer understand the warning? No, she admitted, returning the pigments to their box. But the land will. They continued upward, the path growing less distinct as they climbed. By mid-afternoon, they reached a natural shelf cut into the mesa's face, a broad, flat area sheltered by overhanging rock, invisible from below. At the rear of the shelf, dark openings marked the entrances to the cave system. We made it, Samuel breathed, relief washing through him as he scanned the approaches. From this position, they could see for miles across the valley they'd traversed. Any pursuit would be visible long before it reached the base of the mesa. Naya led him into the main cave entrance. The temperature rose noticeably as they moved deeper, the space opening into a large chamber with a high ceiling. Ancient smokestains marked the rock above what had once been a central fire pit. My people sheltered here during wars with the Navajo, Naya explained. Later from the Spanish, then the Americans. Her voice held no bitterness, only the weight of historical truth. Samuel examined the chamber with a tactician's eye. Defensible. Single approach. Natural chimney for smoke. He nodded toward smaller openings leading deeper into the mesa. Those connect to other chambers? Yes, some lead to water, others to hidden exits on the far side. They spent the remainder of the daylight hours preparing, unsaddling the horses in a sheltered section of the outer ledge, bringing supplies into the main chamber, gathering what firewood they could find. Samuel set simple alarms along the approach path, arrangements of loose stones that would clatter if disturbed, trip lines that would alert them to nighttime visitors. As sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and reds, they stood at the edge of the shelf, watching for movement in the valley below. Samuel's spyglass revealed no immediate pursuit, though the distant smudge of smoke suggested a camp, perhaps Mercer and his men. Perhaps just travelers seeking shelter from the lingering winter. We should prepare for nightfall, Naya said. Turning back toward the cave entrance, Samuel remained a moment longer, scanning the darkening landscape. Something about the sheriff's warning nagged at him, not just Mercer's expanded forces, but the dogs. Bloodhounds were relentless once they had a scent. Inside the main chamber, Naya had begun preparing their meager evening meal. As darkness fell, she lit a small fire in the ancient pit, its light casting flickering shadows across the cave walls where generations before had gathered for similar reasons. Survival. Protection, communion. Samuel sat across from her, cleaning his rifle methodically, checking each round of ammunition. If they come tomorrow, he said finally, you should go deeper into the caves. Use those back exits you mentioned. Naya looked up from the fire, her expression unchanged, but her eyes hardening slightly. We have discussed this. I will not run. Naya, no. The word was soft but absolute. My people did not survive centuries by abandoning each other in times of danger. Samuel set down his rifle, meeting her gaze across the flames. This isn't your fight. The pardon proves it. Mercer's quarrel is with me. Has been since White Rock. You believe that? Naya's voice held gentle challenge. That he pursues you now because of what happened 8 years ago. Not because of me. The question struck uncomfortably close to truth. Samuel had no ready answer. Our paths joined that day at Bitter Creek, she continued. Perhaps they joined even before, at White Rock, when you chose to leave rather than continue. Whatever comes now, we face together. After their simple meal, Naya opened her pigment box again. Samuel watched as she mixed the ochre, white and black, creating a paste that she applied to her own face in careful patterns, lines across her cheekbones, symbols on her forehead, a sweeping curve from temple to jaw. War paint, he asked. No, protection. She offered him the small bowl of mixed pigment. For you also, if you wish. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. Naya's fingers were cool against his skin as she applied the mixture, her touch precise, almost ritualistic. He remained still under her ministrations, aware of an intimacy that transcended their physical proximity. There, she said finally, sitting back to observe her work. Now the ancestors will recognize you. As what? Samuel asked. Her eyes met his, steady in the firelight. As one worthy of their protection. Later, as Naya slept near the fire, Samuel took first watch at the cave entrance. The night spread vast and clear before him, stars piercing the blackness with cold fire. In his pocket, he carried the presidential pardon, his official absolution. On his face, he wore the marks of Naya's people, a different kind of acceptance equally profound. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, perhaps violence. Tonight offered this moment of stillness, of clarity. Whatever came next, he was done running, from White Rock, from Mercer, from the feelings that had grown between himself and the remarkable woman who slept behind him. For the first time in 8 years, Samuel Ward felt at peace with his path, regardless of where it led. Dawn broke with the distant baying of hounds. Samuel, who had taken the final watch, tensed at the sound, faint but unmistakable. Through his spyglass he spotted them, a line of riders emerging from the eastern foothills, dogs running ahead of mounted men. Mercer had found their trail. "They're coming," he said, as Naya joined him at the lookout. 7 riders, dogs in front. She studied the approaching party, her face calm despite the ceremonial paint that had partially rubbed away during sleep. "How long?" 2 hours, maybe 3 if the snow slows them. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, repositioning supplies, securing the horses in the rear chamber near a natural spring. Their preparations had a strange domestic quality, like a couple readying their home for visitors rather than fortifying against attack. "I'll take the first position," Samuel said, indicating the narrow approach path. "If they make it past the lower switchbacks, we can fall back to the cave entrance." Naya nodded, but her attention had fixed on something outside their defenses, a crude wooden ladder left by previous occupants. Propped against the cliff face, leading to a small outcropping above the cave entrance. "The high ground," she said. "I can reach it from inside through the upper passage." Samuel assessed the position. It offered excellent coverage of the approach path, but left the shooter exposed. "Too dangerous. You cannot cover all approaches alone," she countered. "And I am not a poor shot." Before he could argue further, the baying grew louder. The dogs had caught their scent properly now. Through the spyglass, Samuel watched Mercer gesture commands to his men, spreading them into a search formation as they approached the base of the mesa. "They're moving faster than I expected," he admitted. Naya disappeared into the cave system, returning moments later with Samuel's Colt revolver and her own small-caliber pistol, a .31 pocket revolver he'd given her for protection. "I will take the high position," she said again. Not a request this time, but a statement of intent. Samuel wanted to refuse, to insist she remain safely in the rear caves. But the tactical advantage was undeniable. With 2 firing positions, they could create a crossfire that would make the narrow approach nearly impossible to breach. "Be careful," he said finally. "If they spot you, fall back immediately." She touched his face briefly, fingers tracing where her protective markings had been. "You as well." As she disappeared into the upper passage, Samuel positioned himself at a natural stone barricade overlooking the main approach path. He laid out his ammunition carefully, rifle cartridges and shotgun shells arranged for quick reloading. On the rock beside him, he placed his father's old cavalry sword, its brass guard polished to a dull gleam. The sword had hung unused on his wall for years, a relic of another life. This morning he'd strapped it to his saddle on impulse, a final acknowledgement of his heritage, both its honor and its shame. Within the hour, the first of Mercer's men appeared on the trail below, one of the civilians from town, rifle in hand, leading a straining bloodhound. Samuel could have taken the shot easily, but held his fire. Despite everything, he had no desire to kill a townsman who might simply be following what he believed were lawful orders. Instead, he triggered one of his prepared defenses, a carefully balanced stack of rocks that crashed down across the path, startling both man and dog. The civilian retreated hastily, shouting warnings to those behind him. A tense half-hour followed as Mercer's party regrouped at the base of the mesa. Through the spyglass, Samuel watched their captain gesturing animatedly, clearly laying out a new plan of attack. 3 men, all soldiers, began to ascend by different routes, attempting to flank the main path. "They're splitting up," Samuel called softly, knowing Naya could hear from her position. "Watch the western approach." The first direct engagement came when a young soldier appeared on the path below Samuel's position, moving cautiously from cover to cover. Samuel fired a warning shot that kicked up stone fragments near the man's feet. "That's close enough," he called. "Next one won't miss." The soldier ducked behind a boulder. "Samuel Ward?" he shouted back. "This is Corporal Ellis, United States Army. You're ordered to surrender yourself and the Apache woman." "I have a presidential pardon," Samuel replied. "No authority to surrender to," a new voice answered, Mercer's distinctive command tone. "The pardon's been rescinded, Ward. New evidence of your collaboration with hostiles." Samuel had expected this lie. "Convenient timing, Captain. Seems the law changes to suit your purposes." "Last chance, Ward. Send out the woman. You might yet avoid a hanging." From somewhere to the west came the crack of Naya's pistol, followed by a cry of pain. One of the flanking soldiers had found the secondary path. The exchange of gunfire that followed was sporadic but intense. Samuel's superior position forced Mercer's men to seek cover, limiting their advance up the narrow trail. Twice they attempted to rush forward, only to be driven back by Samuel's accurate fire. An hour into the standoff, Samuel spotted movement on the eastern edge of the shelf. A soldier had found a route up the cliff face. He swung his rifle to fire, but Naya had seen the threat as well. Her shot caught the man in the shoulder, sending him scrambling back down the way he'd come. "Samuel!" Her voice carried clearly from her position. "More coming from below." Through a gap in the rocks, Samuel spotted 3 men working their way up the main path, using the confusion of the firefight as cover. One was Mercer himself, recognizable even at a distance by his distinctive cavalry hat. Samuel fired twice, forcing them back momentarily. But his ammunition was running low, and the constant repositioning to cover multiple approaches was taking its toll. A bullet from below grazed his arm, leaving a burning furrow across his bicep. "Fall back," he called to Naya. "To the cave entrance!" As he retreated from his position, a shot shattered stone near his head. Samuel ducked, returning fire with his remaining rifle rounds. By the time he reached the cave entrance, Naya was already there, reloading her pistol with steady hands. "How many rounds left?" he asked. 6 for the pistol. 2 for the shotgun." Her eyes assessed his bloody sleeve. "You're hit. Just a graze." Samuel checked his own ammunition. "I've got 8 rifle rounds, plus whatever's in the revolver. Not enough for a prolonged siege." They both knew it. From their new position, they could hear Mercer ordering his men to advance. Soon the attackers would reach the shelf, and the final confrontation would begin. In this moment of relative quiet, Samuel drew the presidential pardon from his coat. The document that had seemed so significant yesterday now felt like a hollow gesture, ink on paper that carried no weight against Mercer's determination. "Whatever happens," he said to Naya, "know that these months with you have been the only ones since White Rock where I've felt alive again." Her eyes, steady and certain, held his. "And you have given me back what was taken, a place, a purpose, a home." The word held such weight coming from her, a woman whose home had been destroyed, whose people had been scattered. That she had found home with him seemed a miracle beyond deserving. Movement at the edge of the shelf drew their attention. Mercer and 4 men had reached the flat area before the cave, spreading out to minimize their vulnerability. The captain stepped forward, close enough now that his features were clearly visible. The same cold eyes Samuel remembered from White Rock Canyon. "It's over, Ward," Mercer called. "Throw out your weapons." Samuel stepped partially into view, rifle ready. "You've no authority here, Mercer." "The pardon is worthless," the captain interrupted. "Obtained under false pretenses. The Apache raids were real. We have witnesses." "Witnesses you manufactured," Samuel countered. "Just like the evidence." Mercer's face twisted with contempt. "Always the righteous one, weren't you? Even at White Rock, looking down on those of us who followed orders." Who did what was necessary. Samuel felt old anger rising. Slaughtering women and children was necessary? It was war, Mercer spat. The kind you never had the stomach for. The kind that's still happening while you play house with the enemy. Thomas Gentry moved to Mercer's side, shotgun cradled in his arms. Is the Indian woman in there, Ward? Send her out and maybe we can talk terms. There are no terms, Samuel replied. The lady stays with me. A strange silence fell over the standoff, broken only by the wind that had begun to rise, driving loose snow across the stone shelf in ghostly patterns. The lady. Mercer's laugh held no humor. Have you forgotten what her kind did to settlers? To women and children on isolated homesteads? I haven't forgotten what was done by either side, Samuel said. The difference is, I'm trying to end the cycle, not perpetuate it. Mercer stepped closer, seemingly unconcerned by the rifle trained on him. One last offer, Ward. We take the woman for proper processing through Indian affairs. You walk away with your pardon intact, a free man. For a moment, Samuel said nothing. And if I refuse? Then you're resisting a legal detachment of the United States Army. The consequences are clear. Samuel felt Naya's presence beside him, solid and unwavering. No words were necessary between them now. Here's my answer, Samuel said, tossing the pardon document onto the ground between them. I don't want freedom bought with her captivity. Something shifted in Mercer's expression, a cold calculation replacing negotiation. So be it. What happened next unfolded with the terrible clarity of combat. Mercer signaled his men, who raised their weapons as one. Samuel fired first, catching a soldier in the leg. Naya's shot went wide as the men scattered for cover. The ensuing firefight was chaotic, bullets ricocheting off stone, men shouting orders and curses. Samuel and Naya used the cave entrance for cover, taking careful shots to conserve ammunition, while Mercer's men gradually advanced from boulder to boulder. A shotgun blast from Gentry tore chunks from the cave entrance near Samuel's head. He returned fire with his revolver, forcing the blacksmith back momentarily. But the attackers were pressing closer, their superior numbers beginning to tell. Samuel! Naya's voice cut through the gunfire. The rear passage, we need to retreat. He shook his head, ejecting spent shells from his rifle. They'll just follow us in. We'd be trapped. A bullet struck stone inches from Naya's position, showering her with fragments. Samuel pulled her deeper into the cave entrance, shielding her with his body as he fired his last rifle round at a soldier who had broken cover. My pistol's empty, Naya said, voice steady despite everything. Just the shotgun now. Samuel checked his revolver, 3 rounds remaining. Not enough. In the momentary lull that followed, Mercer's voice carried clearly. Last chance, Ward. Send her out now. Samuel met Naya's eyes in the shadowed cave entrance. In them, he saw not fear, but a fierce determination that matched his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Mercer. Samuel called back. You want her, you come through me. The captain's response was immediate, a barked order to his men. Take them. Both of them. As the attackers rose for their final assault, 2 shots rang out from beyond the shelf, sharp cracks that echoed across the mesa. One of Mercer's soldiers fell, clutching his shoulder. Another bullet struck rock near the captain's feet. Hold your fire. A familiar voice carried from the approach path. United States Marshal. Hold your fire. Into view came Sheriff Mills, badge gleaming on his chest, but beside him walked an older man in the formal uniform of a cavalry colonel. Silver eagles on his shoulders catching the winter sunlight. Colonel Pierce, Samuel breathed. Recognition immediate despite the years. Mercer's face drained of color as he recognized his superior officer. Colonel! Sir, we're apprehending deserters and hostile. Silence, Captain! Pierce's voice cracked like a whip. Sheriff Mills has informed me of your unauthorized action. These people are under federal protection. Sir, with respect, the woman is an unregistered Apache, subject to... Pierce cut him off with a raised hand. The woman is legally registered as Naya Ward, wife of pardoned former Captain Samuel Ward, according to documentation filed yesterday with the Territorial Office. He produced an official-looking document from inside his coat. signed by Judge Hollister and witnessed by Sheriff Mills. Samuel's eyes went to Naya, who looked equally stunned by this pronouncement. Mercer's face contorted with fury. "That's impossible. They can't be." "The law recognizes their union," Pierce continued implacably. "Common law marriage was established by their cohabitation and public presentation as husband and wife over these past months. Sheriff Mills has provided ample witness testimony from townspeople who understood them to be married." Samuel nearly laughed at the audacity of it, a legal fiction created by Pierce and Mills to place Naya beyond Mercer's reach. The sheer, elegant simplicity of the solution left him momentarily speechless. Mercer wasn't finished. "Sir Ward deserted his post." "The pardon is valid and registered," Pierce interrupted, producing another document. "I personally delivered it to the territorial office. Captain Ward," he nodded toward Samuel, "is a free man with all rights restored, including the right to marry whomever he chooses." The confrontation that followed was brief but intense, Mercer protesting, Pierce countermanding, the soldiers gradually lowering their weapons as the chain of command reasserted itself. Even Thomas Gentry, seeing the tide turn, stepped back from his aggressive stance. As the tension slowly dissipated, Samuel led Naya cautiously from the cave entrance. Colonel Pierce approached them, his weathered face unreadable. "Captain Ward," he said formally, then with a slight softening, "Samuel, it's been a long time." "Yes, sir," Samuel replied, military habits returning unbidden. "Not since White Rock." Pierce nodded, regret flickering across his features. "A dark day. One that's haunted us both, I think." He turned to Naya, inclining his head respectfully. "Mrs. Ward, I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting." Naya studied him with the steady gaze that Samuel had come to cherish, assessing, intelligent, unintimidated by rank or status. "You were their commander." "At White Rock, I was," Pierce admitted. "A responsibility I've carried these 8 years. As has your husband." The word hung in the air between them. Husband. No longer a legal fiction, but suddenly a truth neither had acknowledged until this moment as Pierce turned to deal with his chastened captain. Sheriff Mills approached, a bemused expression beneath his frosted mustache. "Sorry about the presumption," he said quietly. "Only legal way to protect her status. Judge Hollister owed me a favor." Samuel shook his head, still processing the turn of events. "Thank you doesn't begin to cover it." "Well," Mills scratched his beard thoughtfully, "you could make an honest woman of her properly once this is settled. Save me from perjury charges." Naya's hand found Samuel's, fingers intertwining with quiet certainty. "We will consider it," she said, the hint of a smile touching her lips, as Mercer and his men were ordered to stand down. As Pierce explained the legal ramifications of their unauthorized action, as the tension of imminent death gradually faded from the mountain air, Samuel felt something settle within him, a peace he'd thought forever lost at White Rock Canyon. The brass sword guard caught the sunlight as it lay forgotten beside the cave entrance, a relic of the past that no longer defined him. Whatever came next would be written in their own terms, not by the ghosts of former battles or the prejudices of others. It would soon end, he thought, remembering his words to Naya months ago by the corral. Not their time together, but the long war within himself, the guilt, the running, the belief that redemption lay always beyond reach. Beside him, Naya stood tall in the winter sunlight, her hand steady in his. Not a prisoner, not a ward, but a partner. His equal in all things, including the choice of what their future might hold. Samuel squeezed her hand gently, feeling her answering pressure. Silent communication, perfected over their months together. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side, for the first time in 8 long years. Samuel Ward looked toward tomorrow without dread. Spring came early to the valley that year, as if the land itself were eager to shed the memory of winter's conflict. The ranch that had once belonged to Samuel alone now bore subtle changes. A garden twice its former size, smoke curling from a newly built sweat lodge, A corral where the once wild stallion now stood alongside Samuel's gelding. Most noticeable was the sign that hung at the property entrance, carved cedar. The lettering burned into the wood with patient craft. Ward and Whitefeather Ranch Naya had chosen to keep her mother's family name when they formalized their marriage in March. Some traditions should continue, she had said simply. Samuel agreed, understanding the importance of honoring what had been lost. The wedding itself had been small but significant, Judge Hollister officiating, Sheriff Mills and the Hendersons serving as witnesses, Colonel Pierce standing solemnly in the back of the courthouse. Mercer had been reassigned to a desk position in Washington. His career effectively ended by Pierce's report on the unauthorized pursuit. Now, as evening settled over the land, Samuel sat on the porch steps, watching Naya work with a young woman from town, Martha Henderson's niece, come to learn about medicinal herbs. The girl had been the first, but not the last. Word had spread about the healer at the Ward Ranch. Women came with their ailments, their difficult pregnancies, their sick children. Men came too, eventually, though more cautiously. Injuries that wouldn't heal, chronic pains that whiskey couldn't dull. Each visitor departed with more than just medicine. They carried stories, understanding, small bridges built between worlds that had seemed unbridgeably separate. "That's enough for today, Beth," Naya told her student as shadows lengthened. "Remember to keep the feverfew separate from the golden seal." The girl nodded earnestly, gathering her notes, careful drawings of plants with Naya's teachings written alongside in a careful hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Ward. Same time next week." "Yes, and bring those salves for your mother to try." As Beth rode away, Naya joined Samuel on the steps, her presence a familiar comfort at his side. "She learns quickly," she observed. "Like her teacher," Samuel replied, earning a small smile. They sat in companionable silence as the first stars appeared. Such moments had become precious to them, peaceful interludes in lives that had grown increasingly interwoven with the community around them. "Thomas Gentry's wife came today," Naya said after a while. "While you were checking the north pasture," Samuel raised an eyebrow. "The blacksmith had been among the most hostile during the confrontation at the caves." "What did she want?" "The headaches are better with my medicine. Now her husband suffers from his back. Old mining injury." Naya's expression remained neutral. "They gave her something for him. Does Gentry know his wife came?" "I believe that is why she waited until you were away." Now Naya did smile. Some pride takes longer to heal than bones. From inside the house came a soft whimpering. Both turned immediately, but Naya rose first. "I will check on her." Samuel watched as she disappeared into the house, returning moments later with a small bundle cradled in her arms, a baby girl, just 6 weeks old, with Samuel's eyes and Naya's dark hair. Sarah Elizabeth Whitefeather Ward, named for both their pasts while belonging entirely to their future. "She was just dreaming," Naya said. Settling beside him again, the infant nestled against her shoulder. Samuel reached over to touch his daughter's tiny hand, still marveling at the miracle of her existence. The child who, according to all the laws and prejudices of their time, should never have been born. Yet here she was, living proof that healing was possible, that new beginnings could emerge from old wounds. On the fence post nearest the house hung a dream catcher, intricate, beautiful, woven by Naya during her pregnancy. Not an artifact from her past, but something new she had created, combining traditional patterns with materials from their shared life. Feathers from the ranch birds, sinew from their hunt, beads traded from passing Comanche. "Your grandmother would be proud," Samuel said, nodding toward the dream catcher as it moved gently in the evening breeze. Seeing traditions continue, Naya followed his gaze. "She would say all good dreams are worth catching, no matter where they come from." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. The land stretched out before them, not just property now, but a home. Not just a place of isolation and penance, but of connection and possibility. "It will soon end," Samuel murmured, echoing words spoken months ago in a moment of uncertainty. Naya looked at him questioningly. The division, he clarified, looking down at their sleeping child. Between your people and mine. Not in our lifetime, perhaps. But someday, Naya's hand found his, a touch that had become as essential as breath. It has already ended here, she said simply. In this place. With us. As the stars multiplied overhead, Samuel found himself believing for the first time in years that some wounds could truly heal. Not erased or forgotten, but transformed into something new, something with roots deep enough to weather whatever storms might come.